What? What do you want, miss? Nothing, right? You just come in here looking like that for nothing? I mean, that's good, because I have nothing to give you. I'm mad at you, so just give me some space, okay? I told you, I don't want to talk to you right now. Yes, really. I don't want to talk to you. Okay, you see this? Look at me. You see this? This is me, a man who doesn't want to talk. Okay? No, but it is that bad, actually. It's... First of all, miss, don't pull out that cute voice, okay? That's... Why? That's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. Look, I have to put my foot down here. Every now and then, a man has to just be firm, and... I'm working. Okay, see, I'm working. I'm busy. You need to just... You need to go. Be over there. Go somewhere. Go someplace. Why didn't you move? You're still here. Yes, it has to be now, miss. Okay? Like... Okay. I am angry at you, Tiger. This isn't okay. Just go somewhere else. I can't keep just brushing things aside. That's like a big problem that I keep doing, okay? I brush, and then one day there's like no floor left for me to brush. And like, what do I do then? Like, what do I do? Come on. Seriously, I need to be firm. Well, okay. You know what I don't miss? I don't miss hearing you argue back and forth with my mother about why we're not going to visit her on her birthday. Okay, that... I don't miss that. Go over there. Okay, you can... I don't care if you're in here. It's fine. Just sit in that chair over there. Over there. Way over there. It's not far. It's a good distance away. It's actually the correct distance for a person I'm currently mad at. Oh my goodness, Tiger, you're not moving. Why aren't you moving? you're just standing there, looking at me. Make you go. I'm not going to. Okay, look, we're not going to stop. You're. Oh my goodness, what am I gonna do with you? What am I gonna do with you? Make me. She says, really? Make me. I'm not gonna force you, okay? Look, I'm being firm, but I'm not about to use force, okay? Look. The point is, I didn't like what happened between you and my mother, okay? I don't know why you had to say all of that. Yes, you're right. You're 100% right. It's true. We're not gonna visit her, but like, my sweet love, we have to have some tact with her. You know how my mom is. You know exactly how she is. Sweetheart. My love. My beautiful, beautiful, beautiful darling. Do you want me to quote word for word what she told me you said to her? You said, and I quote, well, we won't have time to visit you this time because he's going to be spending time away with me. I've got a work trip I need to take care of, and he wants to make sure that I'm taken care of. Really? Really? To my mom? Really? Really? You did that whole emphasis on taking care of, I heard. Come on. Why? Why would you do that? There's literally no reason to do that, miss. Like, literally none. Nothing called for you to do that. But you were just like, I'm gonna do it anyway. Okay, I hear you. It may have been honest. It may have been the truth. But it's about the way you said it, okay? That purposeful intent on taking care of. I mean, come on. You can be right and still make somebody bleed, and that's literally what happened. I am mad at you. What do you mean I don't sound mad at you? I am. It's just... Okay. Okay. Why are we here? What are we doing? Why can't I ever just be mad at you? I know it's my problem. I know, and I'm trying to make it your problem. So stop. Stop being just let me have a problem on your side of the room. I'm not making it easy. You're just okay, you know, don't Miss Tiger, don't do that with your voice. Okay, that's okay, fine. Fine. I'm going to try something else. I'm just not going to talk to you. In fact, I'm going to pretend like you don't exist. Well, you're going to see it now, okay? Starting right now. Literally right now. I'm ignoring you. I'm not going to talk to you. Very quiet in here. Yep. Peaceful. Just a simple man working alone. Definitely nothing good to look at in here. What? Baby, you haven't drunken any water today? Oh my god. How many times have I been telling you, you need to make sure you're hydrated? Really? None since this morning? Oh my god. And that headache? What? Okay, baby girl. Seriously, sit down. Do you want me to get you some water? No, I am ignoring you. It's just you. Okay, that's not fair. That is not fair at all. I didn't give in. No, it's about your health, okay? This is completely separate from me ignoring you. Oh my god, miss. Why are you like this? Why are we doing this? Do you really enjoy the fact that I can't be mad at you for like 10 seconds? Is that really such a good thing? I personally, baby, my love, I don't think that's a healthy thing, actually. Okay, let me just be serious for a second. Look, baby girl, when something's this serious to me, and it is, a little. I mean, obviously, you are the most important person to me, without a doubt. 0 questions asked. Like, that's not up for debate, ever. Okay, so if you know that, then why do you feel the need to rub it in my own mother's face like that? Like, in front of her? Like, come on. You're right. 100%. She was. She was being really mean to you last year. And I called her out on it too. I did. What she was doing was not okay. And I told her that to her face, okay? I'm not pretending like it didn't happen. Darling, don't make me pick a side, okay? You already know whose side I'm on, okay, miss? It's obvious. I'm gonna pick you. That's not the point. She raised me. All the things that you love about me, the things that you appreciate about who I am, they came from a warm household, okay? That house is where all of it started. The patience, whatever softness you think I've got, the way I love taking care of you, that came from somewhere. And I know it hasn't always been shown, and I know she doesn't always make it easy. At the very least, I feel like that deserves respect, you know? Well, I don't mind you having fun, but that was way too much fun. That was Look, I'm the one who's gonna have to hear about it for the next whole week. You understand? She's gonna call, she's gonna ask about the weather, and then she's gonna... But you know what? It's okay. Don't worry about it. Point's made. Point can just sit there, and I can just leave the rest. I'm still... Yes, absolutely, baby. Yes, I am still mad at you. I want you to remember that. And I'm going to ignore you. Still, I was just making sure you understood where I stood. What are you doing? I didn't say you could walk so close to me. Why are you coming up to my desk like this? Stop. I said you could sit over there in that chair, okay? Over there. Okay, well, what is it? What did you want to show me? What looks better up close? Yes, I do love your makeup. You look incredibly beautiful right now. I see you're trying something different. And it looks good. Okay, it looks amazing. You look good. You look so beautiful. Okay, well, I know you wanted me to see it up close, but you know, it's kind of difficult when I can literally feel your warmth. You're so close to me that I can feel your body heat radiating off of you. And that's not a good thing right now because I cannot have that happen. Because I'm supposed to be ignoring you. You know why. You know exactly why. So go over there, back to the correct distance. Okay, enough. Obviously, I'm not gonna make you go over there. Obviously, I'm not. Oh boy. What do you want, miss? What is it that you actually want? Stop. Don't lay your head on my shoulder. Come on, miss. Fine, I missed you too, okay? Read you a poem? What? Baby girl, why do you think I can just bust out a random poem just like that? I'm not... No, I don't know how to do that. Who has poems on the ready? That's not a normal thing to just have on hand. I really don't. Okay, fine, maybe. Maybe. Just... whatever. My love is as a fever, longing still, for that which longer nurseth the disease, feeding on that which doth preserve the ill, the uncertain sickly appetite to please. My reason, the physician to my love, angry that his prescriptions are not kept, hath left me, and I desperate now approve. Desire his death, which physic did accept. Past cure I am, now reason is past care. And frantic mad with evermore unrest. My thoughts and my discourse, as madmen's are, at random from the truth vainly expressed. For I have sworn thee fair and thought thee bright, who art black as hell, as dark as night. Okay, yeah, whatever. It's a dangerous poem, by the way. Anyway, you miss my sweet love. You have to stop doing this to me. You really do. What do you mean we'll see about that? I said what I meant, okay? And I meant it. You know what? Fine. Whatever. I give up. Are you happy? Am I still mad at you? Am I still mad at you? Whatever, no. I'm not mad at you. I mean, honestly, I was probably never even mad at you to begin with. I was just disappointed, okay? Because I know you better than that. I know that you're above that. Just next time with her. Okay? That's all I'm asking. And you will have my attention. You always have my attention. That's never once been the problem. That's why I need you to work with me and listen, okay? You need to listen to me. You need to listen to me. And listen, I know the amazing person that you are. I do. And that's the side of you that I want everybody else to see too, including my mom. I want them all to see how amazing and warm and kind and just perfect you are. Okay, well then perfectly imperfect. Whatever it is, you fit me just right. And that's all that matters at the end of the day. Don't be sorry. It's not something I want you to be sorry for. I just want to make sure we're on the same page next time. Is that okay, Pups? Okay, now there's a condition. Okay, what's your condition? Okay, counter condition. I don't mind holding you in my arms for the rest of the day if, and only if, you sit here with me and we fall asleep listening to some historically relevant speeches. Okay then. Fine, good deal. Come here, miss. Let me hold you.
Debate. James Baldwin versus William Buckley. Subject. Has the American dream been achieved at the expense of the American Negro? This debate was held recently at the Cambridge Union, Cambridge University, England, and was recorded for use by NET.
Well, here we are in the debating hall of the Cambridge Union. Hundreds of undergraduates and myself waiting for what could prove one of the most exciting debates in the whole 150 years of the Union history. I don't think I've ever seen the Union so well attended. There are undergraduates everywhere. They're on the benches, they're on the floor, they're in the galleries, and there are a lot more outside clamoring to get in. Well, the motion that has drawn this huge crowd tonight is this, that the American dream has been achieved at the expense of the American Negro. The debate will open with two undergraduate speakers, one from each side, and then we shall have the first distinguished guest, Mr. James Baldwin, the well-known American novelist who's achieved a worldwide fame with his novel, Another Country. Then opposing the motion will be Mr. William Buckley, also an American, very well known as a conservative in the United States. I must stress a conservative in the American sense, author of a book called Up from Liberalism, and editor of the National Review, one of the early supporters of Senator Goldwater. Well, this is the setting of the debate, and at any moment now, the President will be leading in his officers and his distinguished guests. He'll take his chair, and the debate will begin.
motion before the House tonight is the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. We propose to Mr. David Haycock of Pembroke College and oppose to Mr. Jeremy Burford of Emmanuel College. Mr. James Baldwin will speak third. Mr. William F. Buckley Jr. will speak fourth. Mr. Haycock is the heir of the House.
Mr. President, sir, it is the custom of the House for the first speaker in any debate to extend a formal welcome to any visitors to the House. I can honestly say, however, that it is a very great honor to be able to welcome to the House this evening Mr. William Buckley and Mr. James Baldwin. Mr. William Buckley has the reputation of possibly being the most articulate conservative in the United States of America. He was a graduate of Yale, and he first gained a reputation for himself by publishing a book entitled God and Man and Yale. Since then, he has devoted himself to the secular, and this has included Norman Mailer, Kenneth Tynan, Mary McCarthy, and Fidel Castro, none of whom have come out of their confrontations unscathed. At present, his principal occupation is editing a right-wing newspaper in the United States entitled The National Review. Mr. James Baldwin is hardly in need of introduction. His reputation, both as a novelist and as an advocate of civil rights, is international. His third novel, Another Country, has been published as a paperback in England today. Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Buckley are both very welcome to the House this evening. Imagine, Mr. President, a society which above all values freedom and equality. A society in which artificial barriers to fulfillment and achievement are unheard of. A society in which a man may begin his life as a rail splitter and end it as president. A society in which all men are free in every sense of the word. Free to live where they choose, free to work where they choose. Equal in the eyes of the law and every public authority, and equal in the eyes of their fellows. A society, in fact, in which intolerance and prejudice are meaningless terms. Imagine, however, Mr. President, that the condition of this utopia has been the persistent and quite deliberate exploitation of 1/9 of its inhabitants. That 1 man in 9 has been denied those rights which the rest of that society takes for granted. That 1 man in 9 does not have the chance for fulfillment or realization of his innate potentiality. That 1 man in 9 cannot promise his children a secure future and unlimited opportunity. Imagine this, Mr. President, and you have what is, in my opinion, the bitter reality of the American dream. A few weeks ago, Martin Luther King had to hold a nonviolent demonstration in Selma, Alabama, in his drive to register Negro voting. By the end of the week of his demonstrations, he was able to write quite accurately, in a national fundraising letter from Selma, Alabama jail, "There are more Negroes in prison with me than there are on the voting rolls." When King wrote that letter, 335 out of 32,700 Negroes in Dallas had the vote, 1% of the Dallas population. After a mass march to the courthouse, 237 Negroes, King among them, were arrested. The following day, 470 children who had deserted their classrooms to protest against King's arrest were charged with juvenile delinquency. 36 adults on the same day were charged with contempt of court for picketing the courthouse while State Circuit Court was in session. On the following day, 111 people were arrested on the same charge, despite their claim that they merely wanted to see the voting registrar. 400 students were arrested and taken to the armory, where many of them spent the night on a cold cement floor. The following day, the demonstration spread to Marion, Alabama. In Marion, Negroes outnumber whites by 11,500 to 6,000 people, and yet only 300 are registered to vote. Negroes in Marion were anxious to test the public accommodation section of the civil rights law. They entered a drugstore, and there they were served with Coca-Cola laced with salt, and were told that hamburgers had risen to $5 each. After the arrest of 15 Negroes for protesting against this treatment, 700 Negroes boycotted their classes next day and marched in orderly fashion to the jail. There they sang civil rights songs until they were warned by a state trooper that they would be arrested if they sang one more song. Of course, they sang another song, and of course, all 700 were arrested. American society has felt fit to use Negro labor. It has felt fit to use the blood of the Negro in 2 world wars. It has felt fit to listen to his music. It has felt fit to laugh at his jokes. And yet, as far as I am concerned, it has never felt fit to give the American Negro a fair deal. And for this reason, Mr. President, I would beg leave to propose the motion that the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro.
I now call Mr. Jeremy Burford of Emmanuel College to oppose the motion.
Now I have Mr. Jeremy Burford of Emmanuel College, who is the first undergraduate opposing the motion.
James Baldwin is well known as one of the most vivid and articulate writers about the Negro problem in America. Mr. Baldwin had a difficult childhood, and he has personally himself suffered discrimination and ill treatment in the South of America. And I would like to say at this time that it is not the purpose of this side of the House to condone that in any way at all. It is not our purpose to oppose civil rights. It is our purpose to oppose this motion. And thank you, sir. Come and collect your fee afterwards. This side of the House denies that the American dream has in any way been helped by this undoubted inequality and suffering of the Negro. We maintain that, in fact, it has hindered the American dream. And if there had been equality, if there had been true freedom of opportunity, the American dream would be very much more advanced than it is now. If the American dream has made any progress, and I think it has been made in spite of the suffering and inequality of the American Negro, and not because of it. Now, it is also implied from this motion that the American dream is encouraging and worsening the suffering of the American Negro. This is emphatically not the case. The American dream, the American economic prosperity and respect for civil liberties has been the main factor in bringing about the undoubted improvement in race relations in America in the last 20 years. And Professor Arnold Rose, who is the author of The Negro in America, which is perhaps the definitive work on the subject, who is also a contributor to what was called a freedom pamphlet, so I should imagine that if he has any bias at all, he is in favor of the Negro. He said that this improvement in race relations will be seen in years to come as remarkably quick. And he has put it down to 3 main causes: increased industrialization and technical advance, the increased social mobility of the American people, and the economic prosperity. And I would put it to this House that industrialization and economic prosperity are 2 of the main ingredients of the American dream. And at the same time, again, I do not want to say that the Negro in America is treated fairly, but at the same time, the average per capita income of Negroes in America is exactly the same as the average per capita income of people in Great Britain. Now, I found that absolutely amazing, and I understand that some of you do as well. So I have got the reference here from the United States News and World Report of July the 22nd, 1963, in which it points out, this will have to be the last interruption I take, the time is running short.
Mr. President, on a point of information, is the Speaker talking of real income or money income?
Yes, I'm talking of money. I'm talking of money income, and I would not wish to disguise that. I would also say that in terms of this, there are only 5 countries in the world where the income is higher than that of the American Negro. And they do not include countries like West Germany and France and Japan. Now, there are in America 35 Negro millionaires. There are Negro 6,000 doctors and so on. Now, I do not, by saying this, wish to emphasize that the Negro is fairly treated. I merely wish to try and convey a more realistic and objective account of the situation of the Negro. I agree that there are Negroes who are very poor indeed, such as such as the old gentleman in the south who was talking about some of his wealthier brethren. And he was saying, yes, some of these rich Negroes, they put on airs, they like the bottom figure of a fraction. The bigger they try to be, the smaller they really are. I would repeat, Mr. President, sir, in the last minute I have, that this debate is not whether civil rights should be extended to American Negroes or not. If it were, it would be a very easy motion to argue for and a very easy motion to vote for. The debate tonight concerns whether the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro. That is, whether the American Negro has paid for the American dream with his suffering, or whether the American dream has furthered Negro inequality. And I would deny those two precepts. I would say that Negro inequality has hindered the American dream, and I would say that the American dream has been very important indeed in furthering civil rights and in furthering freedom for the American Negro. Mr. President, sir, I beg to offer the motion.
It is now with very great pleasure and a very great sense of honor that I call Mr. James Baldwin to speak third to this motion.
Now we have Mr. James Baldwin, the star of the evening, who has been sitting, listening attentively, getting a wonderful reception here in the Cambridge Union. Tremendous enthusiasm from all sides of the House for Mr. Baldwin, who has been listening to the argument. Now will bring the voice of experience to the debate.
Good evening. I find myself, not for the first time, in the position of a kind of Jeremiah. For example, I don't disagree with Mr. Burford that the inequality suffered by the American Negro population of the United States has hindered the American dream. Indeed, it has. I quarrel with some other things he has to say. The other deeper element of a certain awkwardness I feel has to do with one's point of view. I have to put it that way. One's sense of one's system of reality. It would seem to me the proposition before the House, and I put it that way, is the American dream at the expense of the American Negro, or the American dream is at the expense of the American Negro, is a question hideously loaded, and that one's response to that question, or one's reaction to that question, has to depend on the effect on where you find yourself in the world, what your sense of reality is, what your system of reality is. That is, it depends on assumptions which we hold so deeply as to be scarcely aware of them. A white South African, or a Mississippi sharecropper, or a Mississippi sheriff, or a Frenchman driven out of Algeria, all have, at bottom, a system of reality which compels them to, for example, in the case of the French exile from Algeria, to defend French reasons for having ruled Algeria. The Mississippi or the Alabama sheriff, who really does believe when he's facing a Negro boy or girl that this woman, this man, this child must be insane to attack the system to which he owes his entire identity. Of course, for such a person, the proposition of which we try to discuss here tonight does not exist. And on the other hand, I have to speak as one of the people who've been most attacked by what we must now here call the Western or the European system of reality. What white people in the world, because the box of white supremacy, I hate to say it here, comes from Europe. That's how it got to America. Beneath then, whatever one's reaction to this proposition is, has to be the question of whether or not civilizations can be considered as such equal, or whether one civilization has the right to overtake and subjugate and in fact to destroy another. Now what happens happens when that happens, leaving aside all the physical facts which one can quote, leaving aside rape or murder, leaving aside the bloody catalog of oppression, which we are in one way too familiar with already, what this does to the subjugated, the most private, the most serious thing this does to the subjugated, is to destroy his sense of reality. It destroys, for example, his father's authority over him. His father can no longer tell him anything because the past has disappeared, and his father has no power in the world. This means, in the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you are born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone and every face is white, and since you have not yet seen a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, has not pledged allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that Gary Cooper killing off the Indians when you were rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. It comes as a great shock to discover that the country, which is your birthplace, and to which you owe your life and your identity, has not in its whole system of reality evolved any place for you. The disaffection, the demoralization, and the gap between one person and another, only on the basis of the color of their skin, begins there and accelerates throughout a whole lifetime to the present when you realize you're 30 and are having a terrible time managing to trust your countrymen. By the time you are 30, you have been through a certain kind of mill. And the most serious effect of the mill you've been through is again not the catalog of disaster. The policemen, the taxi drivers, the waiters, the landlady, the landlord, the banks, the insurance companies, the millions of details, 24 hours of every day, which spell out to you that you are a worthless human being. It is not that. It's by that time you've begun to see it happening in your daughter or your son or your niece or your nephew. You are 30 by now, and nothing you have done has helped you to escape the trap. But what is worse than that is that nothing you have done, and as far as you can tell, nothing you can do, will save your son or your daughter from meeting the same disaster and not impossibly coming to the same end. Now, we're speaking about expense. I suppose there are several ways to address oneself to some attempt to define what that word means here. Let me put it this way, that from a very literal point of view, the harbors and the ports and the railroads of the country, the economy, especially of the southern states, could not conceivably be what it has become if they had not had, and do not still have indeed, and for so long, for many generations, cheap labor. I am stating very seriously, and this is not an overstatement, that I fix the cotton, and I carried small, and I built the railroad under someone else's whip for nothing. For nothing. The Southern oligarchy, which has until today so much power in Washington, and therefore some power in the world, was created by my labor and my sweat, and the violation of my women and the murder of my children. This, in the land of the free, and the home of the brave. And no one can challenge that statement. It is a matter of historical record. In another way, this dream, and we'll get to the dream in a moment, is at the expense of the American Negro. You watch this in the Deep South in great relief, but not only in the Deep South. In the Deep South, you are dealing with a sheriff or a landlord or a landlady or the girl of the Western Union desk. And she doesn't know quite who she's dealing with, by which I mean that if you're not part of the town, and if you are a northern nigger, it shows in millions of ways. So she simply knows that it's an unknown quantity, and she wants to have nothing to do with it. So she won't talk to you. You have to wait for a while to get your telegram. Okay, we all know this. We've been through it, and by the time you get to be a man, it's very easy to deal with it. But what is happening in the poor woman, the poor man's mind, is this. They've been raised to believe, and by now they helplessly believe, that no matter how terrible their lives may be, and their lives have been quite terrible, and no matter how far they fall, no matter what disaster overtakes them, they have one enormous knowledge and consolation, which is like a heavenly revelation. At least they are not black. Now I suggest that of all the terrible things that can happen to a human being, that is one of the worst. I suggest that what has happened to white Southerners is in some ways, after all, much worse than what has happened to Negroes there. Because Sheriff Clark in Selma, Alabama, cannot be considered, no one can be dismissed as a total monster. I'm sure he loves his wife, his children. I'm sure that, he likes to get drunk. He's, after all, one's got to assume, and he is visibly a man like me. But he doesn't know what drives him to use the club, to menace with the gun, and to use the cattle prod. Something awful must have happened to a human being to be able to put a cattle prod against a woman's breast, for example. What happens to the woman is ghastly. What happens to the man who does it is in some ways much, much worse. This is being done, after all, not 100 years ago, but in 1965, in a country which is blessed with what we call prosperity, a word we won't examine too closely, with a certain kind of social coherence, which calls itself a civilized nation and which espouses the notion of the freedom of the world. And it is perfectly true from the point of view now simply of an American Negro. Any American Negro watching this, no matter where he is, from the vantage point of Harlem, which is another terrible place, has to say to himself, in spite of what the government says we can't do anything about it. But those are white people being murdered in Mississippi work farms, being carried off to jail. Those are white children running up and down the streets. The government will find some way of doing something about it. We have a civil rights bill now. We had an amendment, the 15th Amendment, nearly 100 years ago. I hate to sound again like an Old Testament prophet, but if the amendment was not honored then, I don't have any reason for believing the civil rights bill will be honored now. And after all, one's been there since before, a lot of other people got there. If one has got to prove one's title to the land, isn't 400 years enough? 400 years, at least 3 wars. The American soil is full of the corpses of my ancestors. Why is my freedom or my citizenship or my rights to live there, how is it concealed, their question now? And I suggest further that in the same way, the moral life of Alabama sheriffs and poor Alabama ladies, white ladies, their moral lives have been destroyed by the plague called color. that the American sense of reality has been corrupted by it. At the risk of sounding excessive, what I always felt when I finally left the country, found myself abroad in other places, and watched Americans abroad. And these are my countrymen. And I do care about them. And even if I didn't, there is something between us. We have the same shorthand. I know. When I look at a girl or a boy from Tennessee, where they came from in Tennessee, and what that means. No Englishman knows that, no Frenchman, no one in the world knows that except another black man who comes from the same place. One watches these lonely people denying the only kin they have. We talk about integration in America as though it was some great new conundrum. The problem in America is though it's been integrated for a very long time. Put me next to any African, and you will see what I mean. And my grandmother was not a racist. What we are not facing is the results of what we've done. What one begs the American people to do for all our sakes is simply to accept our history. I was there not only as a slave, but also as a concubine. One knows the power, after all, which can be used against another person if you've got absolute power over that person. It seemed to me when I watched Americans in Europe that what they didn't know about Europeans was what they didn't know about me. They weren't trying, for example, to be nasty to the French girl or rude to the French waiter. They didn't know they hurt their feelings. They didn't have any sense this particular woman, this particular man, though they spoke another language and had different manners and ways, was a human being. And they walked over them with the same kind of bland ignorance, condescension, charming, cheerful, with which they'd always patted me on the head and called me shy, and were upset when I was upset. What is relevant about this is that whereas 40 years ago when I was born, the question of having to deal with what is unspoken by the subjugated, what is never said to the master, of having to deal with this reality was a very remote possibility. It was in no one's mind. When I was growing up, I was taught in American history books that Africa had no history, and neither did I. That I was a savage, about whom the less said the better, who had been saved by Europe and brought to America. And of course, I believed it. I didn't have much choice. Those were the only books there were. Everyone else seemed to agree. If you walk out of Harlem, ride out of Harlem, downtown, the world agrees. What you see is much bigger, cleaner, whiter, richer, safer than where you are. They collect the garbage. People obviously can pay their life insurance. The children look happy, safe. You're not. And you go back home. And it would seem then, of course, that it's an act of God, that this is true, that you belong where white people have put you. It is only since the Second World War that there's been a counter-image in the world. And that image not come about through any legislation on the part of any American government, but through the fact that Africa was suddenly on the stage of the world, and the Africans had to be dealt with in a way that had never been dealt with before. This gave an American Negro, for the first time, a sense of himself beyond a savage or a clown. It has created, and will create, a great many conundrums. One of the great things that the white world does not know, but I think I do know, is that black people are just like everybody else. One has used the myth of Negro and the myth of color to pretend and to assume that you are dealing essentially with something exotic, bizarre, and practically, according to human laws, unknown. Alas, it is not true. We are also mercenaries, dictators, murderers, liars. We are human too. What is crucial here is that unless we can manage to establish some kind of dialogue between those people whom I pretend has paid for the American dream and those other people who have not achieved it, we will be in terrible trouble. I want to say at the end, the last, is that is what concerns me most. We are sitting in this room, and we all, at least we like to think we are, relatively civilized, and we can talk to each other at least on certain levels. So that we could walk out of here assuming that the measure of our enlightenment, or at least our politeness, has some effect on the world. It may not. I remember, for example, when the ex-Attorney General, Mr. Robert Kennedy, said that it was conceivable that in 40 years in America we might have a Negro president. And that sounded like a very emancipated statement, I suppose, to white people. They were not in Harlem when this statement was first heard, and did not hear, and possibly will never hear, the laughter and the bitterness and the scorn with which the statement was greeted. From the point of view of the man in the Harlem barbershop, Bobby Kennedy only got here yesterday. And now he's already on his way to the presidency. We've been here for 400 years, and now he tells us that maybe in 40 years, if you're good, we may let you become president. What is dangerous here is the turning away from anything any white American says. The reason for the political hesitation in spite of the Johnson landslide is the one that's been betrayed by American politicians for so long. And I'm a grown man, and perhaps I can be reasoned with. I certainly hope I can be. But I don't know, and neither does Martin Luther King, none of us know how to deal with those other people whom the white world has so long ignored, who don't believe anything the white world says, and don't entirely believe anything I or Martin say. And one can't blame them. You watch what has happened to them in less than 20 years. It seems to me that the city of New York, for example, this is my last point, which has had Negroes in it for a very long time. If the city of New York were able, as it has indeed been able, in the last 15 years to reconstruct itself, tear down buildings and raise great new ones, downtown and for money, and has done nothing whatever except build housing projects in the ghetto for the Negroes. And of course the Negroes hate it. Presently the property does indeed deteriorate because the children cannot bear it. They want to get out of the ghetto. If the American pretensions were based on more solid, a more honest assessment of life and of themselves, it would not mean for Negroes, when someone says urban renewal, that Negroes simply are going to be thrown out into the streets. This is what it does mean now. This is not an act of God. We're dealing with a society made and ruled by men. If the American Negro had not been president in America, I am convinced that the history of the American labor movement would be much more edifying than it is. It is a terrible thing for an entire people to surrender to the notion that 1/9 of its population is beneath them. And until that moment, until the moment comes when we, the American people, are able to accept the fact that I have to accept, for example, that my ancestors are both white and black, that on that continent we are trying to forge a new identity for which we need each other, and that I am not a ward of America. I am not an object of missionary charity. I am one of the people who built the country. Until this moment, there is scarcely any hope for the American dream, because the people who are denied participation in it, by their very presence, will wreck it. And if that happens, it's a very grave moment for the West. Thank you.
Tremendously moving moment now. The whole of the Union standing and applauding this magnificent speech of James Baldwin. Never seen this happen before in the Union in all the years that I have known it. Baldwin smiling, obviously delighted by his reception, tremendously moved by it.
I am now very grateful and very pleased to be able to call on Mr. William F. Buckley, Jr. to speak forth to this motion.
Now we have Mr. William Buckley, who will need all his skill to establish a sentency over his audience, which has clearly been so deeply moved.
Thank you, Mr.
by the
President.
eloquence and
Baldwin.
personal experience of the preceding speaker.
Haycock, Griffith, gentlemen. It seems to me that of all the indictments Mr. Baldwin has made of America, here tonight and in his copious literature of protest, the one that is most striking involves, in effect, the refusal of the American community to treat him other than as a Negro. The American community has refused to do this. The American community, almost everywhere he goes, treats him with the kind of unction, the kind of satisfaction at posturing carefully for his flagellations of ossification, that indeed, quite properly, commands the contempt which he so eloquently showers upon us. It is impossible, in my judgment, to deal with the indictment of Mr. Baldwin unless one is prepared to deal with him as a white man. Unless one is prepared to say to him, the fact that your skin is black is utterly irrelevant to the arguments that you raise. The fact that you sit here, as is your rhetorical device, and lay the entire weight of the Negro ordeal on your own shoulders is irrelevant to the argument that we are here to discuss. The gravamen of Mr. Baldwin's charges against America are not so much that our civilization has failed him and his people, that our ideals are insufficient, but that we have no ideals. That our ideals rather are some sort of a superficial coating which we come up with at any given moment in order to justify whatever commercial and noxious experiment we are engaged in. Thus, Mr. Baldwin can write his book, The Fire Next Time, in which he threatens America. He didn't, in writing that book, speak with the British accents that he used exclusively tonight, in which he threatened America with the necessity for us to jettison our entire civilization. The only thing that the white man has that the Negro should want, he said, is power. And he is treated from coast to coast in the United States with a kind of
Buckley
unctuous
doesn't choose to give way as the interrupter master, and he has done. The interrupter now said that.
Goes beyond anything that was ever expected from the most servile Negro creature by a Southern family. I propose to pay him the honor this night of saying to him, Mr. Baldwin, I am going to speak to you without any reference whatever to those surrounding protections which you are used to in virtue of the fact that you are a Negro. And here we need to ask the question, what in fact shall we do about it, Mr. President? What shall we in America try to do, for instance, to eliminate those psychic humiliations which I join Mr. Baldwin in believing are the very worst aspects of this discrimination? You found it a source of considerable mirth to laugh away the statistics of my colleague, Mr. Wilford. I don't think they are insignificant. They are certainly not insignificant in a world which attaches a considerable importance to material progress. It is, in fact, the case that seven-tenths of the white income of the United States is equal to the income that is made by the average Negro. I don't think this is an irrelevant statistic, ladies and gentlemen. It takes a capitalization of $15,000, $16,000, $17,000 per job in the United States. This is a capitalization that was not created exclusively as a result of Negro travail. My great-grandparents worked too. Presumably yours worked also. I don't know of anything that has ever been created without the expense of something. All of you who hope for a diploma here are going to do that at the expense of a considerable amount of effort. And I would thank you, please not to belie the fact that a considerable amount of effort went into the production of a system which grants a greater degree of material well-being to the American Negro than that is enjoyed by 95% of the other peoples of the human race. But even so, to the extent that your withering laughter suggested here that you found this a contemptible observation, I agree. I don't think it matters that there are 35 millionaires among the Negro community. If there were 20 million millionaires among the Negro community of the United States, I would still agree with you that we have a dastardly situation. But I'm asking you not to make politics as the crow flies, to use the fleeting phrase of Professor Oakeshott, but rather to consider what, in fact, is it that we Americans ought to do? What are your instructions that I'm to take back to the United States, my friend? I want to know what it is that we should do, and especially I want to know whether it is time, in fact, to abandon the American dream as it has been defined by Mr. Haycock, Mr. Burford. What, in fact, is it that we ought to do, for instance, to avoid due humiliation mentioned by Mr. Baldwin as being a part of his own experience during his lifetime. At the age of 12, you will find on reading his book, he trespassed outside the ghetto of Harlem and was taken by the scruff of the neck by a policeman on 42nd Street and Madison Avenue and said, "Here, you nigger, go back to where you belong." 15, 20 years later, he goes in and asks for a Scotch whiskey at the airport at Chicago and is told by the white barman that he is obviously underage and under the circumstances cannot be served. I know from your faces that you share with me the feeling of compassion and the feeling of outrage that this kind of thing should have happened. What, in fact, are we going to do to this policeman? And what, in fact, are we going to do to this barman? How are we going to avoid the kind of humiliations that are perpetually visited on members of a minority race? Obviously, the first element is concern. We've got to care that it happens. We have got to do what we can to change the warp and woof of moral thought in society in such fashion as to try to make it happen less and less. Let me urge this point to you, which I can do with authority, my friends, the only thing that I can tonight. And that is to tell you that in the United States, there is a concern for the Negro problem. Now, if you get up to me and say, well, now, is there the kind of concern that we student of Cambridge would show if the problem were our own. All I can say is I don't know. It may very well be that there has been some sort of a sunburst of moral enlightenment that has hit this community, so as to make it predictable that if you were the governors of the United States, the situation would change overnight. I'm prepared to grant this as a form of courtesy, Mr. President. But meanwhile, I am saying to you that the engines of concern in the United States are working. The presence of Mr. Baldwin here tonight is in part a reflection of that concern. You cannot go to a university in the United States, a university in the United States presumably also governed by the Lord Spiritual, as you are, in which Mr. Baldwin is not the toast of the town. You cannot go to a university of the United States in which practically all other problems of public policy are preempted by the primary policy of concern for the Negro. I challenge you to name me another civilization, anytime, anywhere in the history of the world, in which the problems of a minority, which have been showing considerable material and political advancement, is as much a subject of dramatic concern as it is in the United States. Let me just say finally, ladies and gentlemen, this. There is no instant cure for the race problem in America. And anybody who tells you that there is a charlatan and ultimately a boring man. Boring precisely because he is then speaking in the kind of abstractions that do not relate to the human experience. The trouble in America where the Negro community is concerned is a very complicated one. I urge those of you who have an actual rather than a purely ideologized interest in the problem to read the book Beyond the Melting Pot by Professor Glaser, also co-author of The Lonely Crowd, a prominent Jewish intellectual, who points to the fact that the situation in America where the Negroes are concerned is extremely complex as a result of an unfortunate conjunction of two factors. One is the dreadful efforts to perpetuate discrimination by many individual American citizens as a result of their lack of that final and ultimate concern which some people are truly trying to agitate the other. Is as a result of the failure of the Negro community itself to make certain exertions which were made by other minority groups during the American experience. If you can stand a statistic not of my own making, let me give you one which Professor Glaser considers as relevant. He says, for instance, in 1900, there were 3,500 Negro doctors in America. In 1960, there were 3,900, an increase in 400. Is this because there were no opportunities, as has been suggested by Mr. Haycock and also by Mr. Baldwin implicitly? No, says Professor Glaser. There are a great many medical schools who are by no means practice discrimination, who are anxious to receive and to train Negro doctors. There are scholarships available to put them through, but in fact that particular energy which he remarks was so noticeable in the Jewish community and to a certain and lesser extent in the Italian-Irish community, for some reason is not there. We should focus on the necessity to animate this particular energy, but he comes to the conclusion, which strikes me as plausible, that the people who can best do it, who can do it most effectively, are Negroes themselves. Let me conclude by reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, that where the Negro is concerned, the danger, as far as I can see at this moment, is that they will seek to reach out for some sort of radical solutions on the basis of which the true problem is obscured. They have done a great deal to focus on the fact of white discrimination against Negroes. They have done a great deal to agitate a moral concern, but where, in fact, do they go now? They seem to be slipping, if you will read carefully, for instance, the words of Mr. Bayard Rustin, towards some sort of a Procrustean formulation which ends up less urging the advancement of the Negro than the regression of the white people. 14 times as many people in New York City born of Negroes are illegitimate as of whites. This is a problem. How shall we address it? By seeking out laws that encourage illegitimacy in white people? This, unfortunately, tends to be the rhetorical momentum that some of their arguments are taking.
One thing you might do, Mr. Buckley, is let them vote in Mississippi.
I agree. I couldn't agree with you more, and for except lest I appear too ingratiating, which is hardly my objective here tonight. I think actually what is wrong in Mississippi, sir, is not that not enough Negroes are voting, but that too many white people are voting. Booker T. Washington said that the important thing where Negroes are concerned is not that they hold public office, but that they be prepared to hold public office. Not that they vote, but that they be prepared to vote. What are we going to do with the Negroes? Having taught the Negroes in Mississippi to despise Barnett, Ross Barnett, shall we then teach them to emulate their cousins in Harlem and adore Adam Clayton Powell, Jr.? It is much more complicated, sir, than simply the question of giving them the vote. If I were myself a constituent of the community of Mississippi at this moment, what I would do is vote to lift the standards of the vote so as to disqualify 65% of the white people who are presently voting. Not simply to give the... I say then that what we need is a considerable amount of practice that acknowledges that there are two sets of difficulties. The difficulties of the white person who acts as white people and brown people and black people do all over the world to protect their own vested interests, who have, as all of the races in the entire world have, and suffer from a kind of a racial narcissism which tends always to convert every contingency into such a way as to maximize their own power. That, yes, we must do. But we must also reach through to the Negro people and tell them that their best chances are in a mobile society. And the most mobile society in the world today, my friends, is the United States of America. The most mobile society in the world is the United States of America, and it is precisely that mobility which will give opportunities to the Negroes which they must be encouraged to take. But they must not, in the course of their ordeal, be encouraged to adopt the kind of cynicism, the kind of despair, the kind of iconoclasm that is urged upon them by Mr. Baldwin in his recent works. Because of one thing, I can tell you, I believe with absolute authority, that where the United States is concerned, if it ever becomes a confrontation between a continuation of our own sort of idealism, the private stock of which, granted, like most people in the world, we tend to lavish only every now and then on public enterprises, reserving it so often for our own irritations and pleasures. But the fundamental friend of the Negro people in the United States is the good nature, and is the generosity, and is the good wishes, is the decency, the fundamental decency that do lie at the reserves of the spirit of the American people. These must not be laughed at. And under no circumstances must they be laughed at, and under no circumstances must America be addressed and told that the only alternative to the status quo is to overthrow that civilization which we consider to be the faith of our fathers, the faith indeed of your fathers. This is what must animate whatever meliorism must come, because if it does finally come to a confrontation, a radical confrontation between giving up what we understand to be the best features of the American way of life, which at that level is indistinguishable, so far as I can see, from the European way of life, then we will fight the issue. And we will fight the issue not only in the Cambridge Union, but we will fight it as you were once recently called to do on beaches and on hills and on mountains and on landing grounds. And we will be convinced that just as you won the war against a particular threat to civilization, you were nevertheless waging a war in favor of and for the benefit of Germans, your own enemies, just as we are convinced that if it should ever come to that kind of a confrontation, our own determination to win the struggle will be a determination to wage a war not only for whites, but also for Negroes.
Will the tellers take their places, please? They voted in favor of the motion being that the American dream is at the expense of the Negro. They voted in favor of that motion 544 persons and against 164 persons. The motion is therefore carried by 380 votes. I declare the House to stand adjourned.
According to the New York Times, he changed the face of scholarship on the Arab world. Edward Said was born in Jerusalem, raised in Egypt, and educated in the United States. After receiving his PhD in English literature at Harvard, he became a professor of English and comparative literature at Columbia. And then, following the Six-Day War in 1967, he was politicized. He met Yasser Arafat, sat on the Palestine National Council, and he became the most outspoken American defender of Palestinian self-determination. He's written over a dozen books and recently published 2 new collections of essays, Representation of the Intellectual and the Politics of Dispossession. I'm very pleased to have Edward Said back here at this table. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Boy, so much has happened. Let me just walk through it with you. I mean, today's headlines are Rabin and Hussein and building between Aqaba and Alat, Hussein and Rabin in Washington, Arafat and Rabin in Washington. Are we one Assad away from peace in the Middle East?
Well, it's difficult to tell, but I think probably in the end, yes, I think there will be a peace agreement with Syria. I don't think Assad has much choice, but he's trying to get the best deal he can, I think.
And is that a good thing?
I think peace is very good, of course, and I'm for it. Unfortunately, the Palestinian side of the whole equation, you know, the peace that was signed in Washington,
obviously.
Yeah, well, that has been a tremendous, to me at least, tremendous disappointment, and I think it expresses more a capitulation on the Palestinian side than it does an achievement towards peace. I think what Arafat got was a tiny pair of enclaves, one of which, Gaza, the Israelis have been trying to get rid of for a long time, and the other, Jericho, is a 50 square mile area, which he supposedly controls. But in fact, the Israelis are still there.
But if you looked at the reality, why isn't it a good idea for the Palestinians or the PLO to make that a deal? And you looked at the reality they had and the alternatives they had, and the fact that this might be the first step towards all of the West Bank, etc.
Well, there are 2 reasons to give, to respond to that. One is that it wasn't the only alternative. There was a whole series of alternatives starting back in the 70s, some of which I was associated with, that Arafat and his group turned down out of, I think, stupidity. And the second thing is that the agreement made in Oslo last summer was really done with Arafat himself with his back to the wall. He had isolated himself. He had made foolish mistakes, beginning with the Gulf War. He was at a low ebb in terms of popularity and money and so on and so forth. So I think the agreement was a way of saving himself rather than thinking of his people. And, you know, the obvious parallel is Mandela in South Africa, who never wavered from his principles, although he was in jail for 27 years, and said, listen, what we want in the end is one person, one vote. We want the end of apartheid. Now, nothing in the agreements that Arafat has signed, whether Oslo or Cairo or whatever, says anything about the end of occupation. The Israelis are still there. The armies are still there. The settlements are still there. The settlements are increasing in size and number. In the months that he signed the agreement in September until now, the Israelis have confiscated another 20,000 acres of Palestinian land. So it's a terrible deal. And another additional reason is it was negotiated with tremendous incompetence. I mean, he didn't even have a lawyer with the Israelis or legal advice.
Outgunned or
Outgunned,
outmanned or...
unprepared. All he wanted was to assure himself something so that he could continue. And now he's in Gaza, and you read the papers. I mean, he's unable to cope. He has no history, no experience in government, and he's alienated most of his good people, and it's a tremendous tragedy for the people, and that's what bothers me, because from the public relations point of view, you know, it's a great scoop, the White House lawn, peace, and so on and so forth, but the fact is that more Palestinians have been killed since the thing was signed. You heard about the massacre, of course, at Hebron. The settlers, in other words, all the important problems have simply been postponed.
And terrorism in Buenos Aires and other places.
The whole cycle, exactly. So it's public relations, Israel getting its strategic objectives, you know, the Arabs capitulating left, right, and center without coordination at all. And Jordan has signed an agreement now, which, you know, I mean, there's very little between Jordan and Israel to dispute. I mean, there's 100 and some square miles near the Dead Sea, but they'll be settled. But the important thing is that Israel is now achieving a kind of power in the Middle East, which makes it the superpower of the region. And it's essentially going to get entree into economic markets and so on and so forth. And the Arabs have no strategy. Their societies are crumbling from within in the most dreadful way. And in my opinion, the future really looks very, very bleak.
For the Palestinians or for what?
Well, I think certainly for the Palestinians in the short run. I don't think Arafat will survive very long. He can't.
Because he will be assassinated, or because
no, I don't think. Well, I think the main problem right now is, you know, for example, all the hospitals in Gaza are short of oxygen. He has to supply oxygen. He has to pay for his police force. He has to provide the teachers with money. He has to pave the roads. He's never done that. He has no money. The international community has promised X number of hundreds of millions of dollars, and they're simply not coming in because he refuses to be accountable. See, they say, we'll give you money, but you have to tell us what the money's for.
You leave me with a lot to ask, but let me just start with this.
Yes.
Most of what you say seems to lie at the feet of Chairman Arafat. A, he could have had some better agreements in the past. B, it is Palestinians who insisted that the Israelis deal with Arafat. They much more would have preferred dealing with other Palestinians.
No, I don't think so. I think not. I think they prefer. I mean, I think.
Well, they may now, but
yeah,
but I remember times in which, I mean, you know, there's a whole wing of Israelis who believe that Arafat is a war criminal and don't want to deal with him still now. You know, and when he talks about Jerusalem, they go berserk. And my point is that there was a time in which Israelis, they may want to deal with him now because he's weak and because they believe, you know, that it's the best time to make things happen and because they think that he is the best person to make things happen with. But it's, some might say, the Palestinians' fault that they select their leader, so don't criticize the leader for the problem.
No, I think that you're partly right. I think that's very fair. There's no question that we've been very forgiving in our leadership. Don't forget, however, that we have no sovereignty. We have no place. I mean, Arafat was exiled to Tunis in 1982 from Beirut. We are a divided population. You know, some of us are Israeli citizens. There are 2 million Palestinians on the West Bank and Gaza. There are 4 million who are outside of Palestine. This is quite interesting. Most of the Palestinian population today does not live on historical Palestine. They live in the diaspora, in exile, in Lebanon and Jordan and so on and so forth. This is a very difficult question. Israel had the United States.
And the United States.
200,000 in this country. We have never had a strategic partner the way Israel has had the United States. I mean, with the end of the Cold War, we were, and the Soviet Union wasn't much help.
And whose fault is that?
No, these are all, I think, objective circumstances. These are the realities of the situation. And the Arab world is a treacherous environment. You know, Palestine being the big cause of every Arab, right? So it was a question of who could capture Palestine as a tool of his or her own foreign policy. And so there was always a fight between the PLO and the other Arab states.
There was
Egypt,
a time Syria wanted
yes,
to
went
take
to
it
war.
over.
Went to war in 1983. They tried to destroy the PLO. So given all of that, there was a general feeling, shared by me among others, you know, that he was our leader. He represented Palestine. He still does. You know, he's a very popular man at one point. So you go along with him. And what developed was a sense that this forgave everything, that he could do anything. Now, we were all aware that in Tunis, and certainly in Beirut before that, he was essentially a tyrant in the sense that he wanted to do everything himself. You needed something.
And not a Democrat.
Well,
a little D.
Because of the circumstances of our existence, he couldn't control everything. So I could say whatever I wanted. I mean, he couldn't get back at me in any way or do anything to me. But what bothers me is that after, I think, 91, the Madrid conference, when I was very involved in the negotiations up until then. Then I got ill and I resigned. I was on a member of the council, as you say. What happened was, I think there was a sudden opening. There was a feeling that after the Gulf War, the Bush administration, that somehow Palestinians for the first time were being recognized. And that sense of recognition overshadowed everything else. The sense finally we were able, don't forget we were ostracized by the United States, not by the rest of the world, but by the United States.
You had to have secret meetings.
Exactly. So there was all of that going on, and I think where we went wrong, in my opinion, was a sense of rushing too quickly, and saying, let's take what we can get, without remembering the realities of the situation and that what we were taking, what Arafat was taking. See, at that point he'd gone out of control. No, he consulted nobody on this secret deal with the Israelis in Oslo. And by that time,
probably was necessary. You know what I mean?
Some kind of. No, I'm not complaining about the secrecy as such, but I mean it covered a great deal of ground. And what I think he did was to just give away a lot. Fine. But what bothers me, see, is not that. I mean, we were weak. There's no question about it. But A, he killed the spirit of the Intifada, which had brought us many gains, right? Yeah. And the spirit of resistance. He personally canceled that. He just said, well, we're stopping that, right? And number two, in my opinion, there wasn't honesty. Had he said, this is all we can get. This is a tragedy. We've lost Palestine. This is a flawed deal in the extreme. Fight with me. Help me. He didn't do that. He lied. He said this is a great achievement. He stood on the White House lawn and celebrated. He forgave Rabin. I mean, Rabin to us is the great criminal. Don't forget. I mean, Rabin was personally responsible for making of refugees in 1948 50,000 people he kicked out of Ramla and Lid. He was the man who was behind. He was the Minister of Defense during the Intifada. He's the man who said break their bones and all the rest of it. Far more of Palestinians were killed than Israelis were. So there was collective amnesia, and I am ashamed that so many Palestinians went along with this in the, I think, foolish hope that it was suddenly going to turn into a wonderful thing. But if you read the text, not many people have read the text of the Declaration of Principles or the Cairo Accord. Many Israelis have said it's a disgraceful document. There isn't a single whit, iota of generosity in it. It just compels Palestinians to be endlessly subordinate to Israel. It keeps the settlements in place. It keeps the army in place. And by and large, it gives the Palestinians what they call limited autonomy, but no self-determination. And I would have settled for self-determination as the goal, but it's not specified.
Yeah, but I mean, here is the other argument being made, and I hear you on that. And let me just talk about Arafat for a second.
Right.
You called him in '83 a man of audacity and vision. You followed that in '86, tragic and fascinating figure. In '88, you said he secured a place in Palestinian history. And then in '93, you say he's a foolish man who misunderstands his own people, and that the autocracy, the profligacy, and the corruption and the stupidity were all there for you to understand, and nobody was able and willing to speak.
No, that's not true. A lot of people spoke, including myself. I mean, there was a constant, of course, on the major issues up until 1988, when we, I was a member of the National Council, and I was one of the drafters of the thing that recognized Israel and so on and so forth, said we have to have two states. He was part of the national consensus. It's after that that the change occurs. I mean, people change, sure. I mean, I'm not saying he still is a tragic figure. He still is a fascinating man. He's one of the.
He still has a place in the history
of course. I mean, and that's what I said. I mean, he brought us to this point. But my point right now is that he should resign. He's done what he can do. He is unreformable. He's never lived in a civil society. I mean, our new needs are to try to construct, in spite of the obstacles of the current situation, the lack of money, the chaos, etc., the years of occupation, you need a new set of goals, right? And he's incapable of providing them. That's what I'm saying.
And the argument is made, though, that he is still the one figure in which more Palestinians, both inside and outside, would you prefer to be Palestine, now the West Bank,
right.
More
for the time being.
He's the one figure that everybody can rally around.
Well, for the time being, but he is not, I don't think, the man. Mark my words. I mean, I'm not a prophet, but my feeling is that he's now at the end of his tether. He has reached where he's going to reach. He's never going to get out of Gaza. He's not going to be able to increase the amount of self-determination that we have. We need a new generation. He's in his middle 60s. He's quite ill. He's out of touch. he has various illnesses. I think that many of them are the result of his plane crash in 1991 and 92. And he's very, very, very tense. I mean, he has now surrounded himself by security apparatus. I mean, the idea that we fought all of these, we've made all of these enormous sacrifices. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed or dispersed, and losses. We lost Palestine. I mean, it's a tragic fact. The Palestine I was born in no longer exists. We've lost it, and new people have supplanted us and taken our land and lived there. It's a fact. It's Israel, right? But we have 20% of this left on the West Bank and Gaza, and that 20%, about 50% of it is already gone, as Israelis will tell you, through the settlements, the confiscations, and so on and so forth. The question is, can you do anything with what's left? I think you need a new vision. You need a new generation of leaders who are developing. Don't forget, we're 6 million people. We're a gifted population. And I think in time he will begin, the slow process of beginning to fail, which is very tragic. And more losses will occur, more killings. And
well, the argument from the Israeli side, in part, though, their practical reality, they would say, is that you better deal with Arafat and the PLO.
Of course, and Jordan.
Because Hamas has a very different agenda.
That's not true, actually. I mean, that's one of the sort of propaganda
from...
Well, first of all, they were the people who, the Israeli government, supported Hamas in the beginning. I mean, they were anxious to get something as an alternative to the PLO. But if you look at the facts and the figures, the fact is that Hamas has never gotten more than about 14 to 15% of any poll on the West Bank and Gaza. They represent now a kind of protest movement. They simply say, we are not interested in this kind of arrangement. Although at the same time, they're very interested in sharing power, if there's any power to be shared. On the other hand, do they represent an alternative? I mean, do they put forward
a different philosophy?
No, absolutely not. No, I don't think so.
Philosophy.
I mean, I've talked to them, I've seen it. They don't mobilize people. And that's the problem with them. I think the alternative, what I think the Israelis want to see is Arafat as their enforcer on the West Bank and Gaza. He is now responsible. It's cheaper than having the Israelis do it. He does it for them. On the West Bank, not on the West Bank, in Jericho and Gaza. Gaza, they couldn't move.
What do you mean by enforcer?
He is supposed to provide them with security, right? And he is responsible. Gaza is one of the most fractious and rebellious places. That's where the Intifada started. Now it's his problem, not the Israelis. The Israelis control the borders, who goes in and out. But what occurs inside Gaza, which is a hellhole, and there are tough and brave and fighting people. And you can read in the papers yesterday, I think in the New York Times, there's an article about the problems in Gaza. You can't deal with it, right? Well, so the Israelis are, laughing all the way to the bank because he said, let him deal with it.
Yeah, but they're not laughing when they see people that show up at a newspaper and say, you got to stop publishing.
Exactly. Well, I mean, they did that. Of course, the Israelis did that, and now he's doing it. His model is precisely every other Arab state, whether it's Iraq or Syria or any of the others, that says, if you don't say what we like, we're going to shut you down. But he will have a fight on his hands because Palestinians are not like the Syrians or the others, because they have a history of fighting exactly that kind of thing, and they're not going to take it from their own leaders any more than they took it from the Israelis.
And he's deeply threatened by the agreement with Jordan, and certainly when you speak about the religious crimes, that becomes...
Well, I mean, it was a calculated... I think, frankly, the situation of Jordan is as follows. I think King Hussein is a very sick man, physically. I think that he has been deeply responsible because of what happened during the Gulf War, because the Palestinians didn't coordinate with it. What does he have to lose? He gets his debt forgiven. He gets some American aid. He basks in the spotlight. He's okay. And of course, the Israelis added that thing about Jerusalem just to embarrass Arafat. So it's a cynical, I think.
Let me present an alternative scenario than the one you hold. Right. It is the following. Rabin, whatever you say about Yitzhak Rabin, he is a different person now, and he sees his own sense of history and his moment. And he's out front, realizing that he's got to change, that he's got to give up territory, that he's got to make peace. And he will make peace with Syria. He'll give him back the Golan, most of the Golan. And he'll...
Yeah, but you see, the thing with Syria is not the Golan.
I know. Well, what?
Oh, I think it's a lot of things like what happened in Iraq. I think they want the demilitarization of the whole area between the Golan Heights and Damascus. They're talking about specific reduction.
What's wrong with that?
Well, I'm just telling you. I mean, but the Israelis are not making the same commitment. I mean, the United States is giving the Israelis more F-15s and F-16s, whereas the Syrians are being asked to cut down their missiles, their military, their aircraft, and so on and so forth. So what you have is a reduction in the net strength of Syria as a deterrent to Israel.
But
that
if
Israel really
is their goal of getting the Golan back, why shouldn't they do that?
well, you see, that's the hesitation, because he gets the Golan back, and it's you know, it weakens him. I mean, we're talking about dictatorships now in the Middle East, all of whom are hanging by the balance, you know, and it's but the point is that Israel
Assad can risk. It is not a risk to him if he gets the Golan back, no matter what demilitarization takes place between Damascus and the Golan. If he doesn't get the Golan back, you might say there's a risk to the dictatorship.
Well, we don't know that he's going to get the Golan back, and how he's going to get it, because he's ready to talk about stages. I'm not sure.
Well, you just said there'd be a peace treaty. Which would be in a peace
exactly.
between
There
Israel and Syria?
have been peace treaties with the Jordanians and the Palestinians that are...
Well, with the Egyptians got back to Sinai, and Jordan...
But the question is normalization. You see, what they want is also normalization. I mean, so that the markets
also want
a
good relationship with the United States.
Well, of course.
Syria.
No, I'm talking about the Israelis, what the Israelis want. Anyway, I think you're right. I mean, we both agree that there is going to be a kind of generalized peace.
Why?
But it's a peace that, if I...
No, I'm sorry.
No, it's just a peace that I think, in the end, favors the Israelis overwhelmingly, because they represent the largest force, the most powerful country, and the most powerful economy. I think the secret of all of these agreements is economic. I mean, there's now, for example, a plan to build a major highway network from Turkey through Israel into the Gulf. There's talk about a Middle East common market and so on and so forth. Now, we're dealing with Arab governments and Arab economies that are much more weak than that of Israel. And in this, certain sectors will profit, but by and large, the Middle East will remain pretty much as it is in the Arab world. And so that's all I'm saying. I mean, I think that's the reality.
Let me finish my point earlier, which was, before we got off on theory, it is that Rabin is a different man, and he really is trying to, he has some sense. I think they clearly were shaken by the Fatah. I mean, it's just shaken the whole country, right?
Right.
As well they should have been.
Exactly. It was a 27-year-old military
extraordinary moment in Palestinian
exactly.
In the evolution of Palestine. Secondly, it shook Israel, and therefore Rabin now looks at this time and says, look, this is the end of the Cold War. A lot of reasons we ought to make peace here. And this notion of the positions we have held to for so long don't play anymore. The Israelis want peace.
Right.
Okay? And now let's try to reach out and and everything has to do with what's politically viable. And leadership means you try to bring your people with you, or you try to go further than they may be wanting to go. But he also is walking a tightrope, as Arafat is, and others might be less so.
But Israel has the power, you see, Charlie, and this is what I'm trying to say. Israel has all the cards. Given what we now see, I'm just talking now about the Palestinian side, because that's the issue. It's not Syria, the Golan Heights, or Jordan, because the disputed territory is Jerusalem and the West Bank. And these, they're biblical and all kinds of cultural things that are much more important than anything to do with Syria or Jordan. What we've seen so far, what Israeli commentators have themselves said about the current crop of agreements, beginning with September 13th Declaration of Principles, through the Cairo Agreement and the Paris Economic Agreement, are all designed to keep Israel at a tremendous advantage on the West Bank and Gaza, right? Where the markets are guaranteed for Israel, cheap labor for Israel, right? Where Palestinian self-determination and the idea of what we accept in South Africa and everywhere else in the world is simply denying Palestinians. There's no sovereignty. Israel controls everything. First of all, has been put off to 1996. They're changing the demography. They're changing the geography. They're taking more land. And what I'm saying is what is being designed for Palestinians is, in effect, a kind of vantage gap, where Palestinians will not have...
The government in Israel today is not in favor of increasing the number of settlements. It's not their policy.
But they have increased the number of settlements. Not the number, but they've increased the size of the settlements.
In terms of the number of people that are going
number of people and number and acres.
There is also talk that they're willing to withdraw from some of those settlements.
Well, none of that
right around Jerusalem.
Well, why hasn't any of that been undertaken in writing? See, I mean, we're talking about solemn international agreements in which Israel doesn't even admit that it's an occupying power. Israel simply talks about itself as an administrative power, but the reality on the ground is that Palestinians are being more divided on the West Bank through these settlements, into about 10 cantons. They're like, divisions on the West Bank, where the settlements are contiguous to each other through the road system, but the Palestinians have to go through Israeli barricades to reach other Palestinian settlements. Now, I'm simply saying it's not a prognosis for an optimistic look to the future. What they're laying the seeds for, I think, is a postponement of the conflict rather than the reconciliation that you and I want and that I would expect from the Israelis as the more powerful. Now, we've recognized them. We've recognized their existence. They haven't recognized our national...
Are you saying you somehow think the Israelis want to colonize the Palestinians?
Well, I think they want them in a subservient place. I think they are... I think there are limits to what you refer to as Rabin's change, and you know, people are also subject to their own history. And I think Rabin's history of the Palestinians... if you read the Israeli press, which I read all the time, most commentators say that Rabin really has to change. You know, Peres is described as a man of vision, but Rabin seems to be pretty much the same. Of course, playing to the whole idea of peace and conflict. But with regard to the Palestinians, it's saying,
I mean, I read of some of the
but
things.
the Palestinian life on the West Bank has gotten worse, Charlie, since the agreement was signed. So the question is, when is this change going to occur? And can one simply trust the document? And if you look at the document, and if you look at the facts, the prognosis is very, to me, bleak. That's what I'm saying. So we need further change. And I think it's important, therefore, to speak out on these matters and say, you know, this is the problem.
There's so much to talk about. Let me just, I want to take note of Representations of the Intellectual, which is a series of your writings, and also The Politics of Dispossession, which is about the struggle for determination between the period which you wrote, 1969 to 94.
Right.
Has your illness, does it have any influence on the way you view these things? And I mean by that, causing you to look at things in a different time frame.
Well, I think I look at them more seriously. Yeah. You know, I think that the important thing is to try as much as possible to tell the truth from as wide a perspective as possible, and you know, to try and look at things from the point of view of the essential, you know, rather than you know the sort of media aspect of it and so forth. Right? And I think it makes one take responsibility more seriously. Yes, I think so. I think so because I really feel that I'm not going to have a chance to say more things for a very long time. I will be able to continue to talk and write. You know, I mean, I hope my health improves enough. But yeah, I think so. It makes me take the notion of being an intellectual more seriously, and you know, and to risk more, to say you know things that perhaps I would have been more cautious
because
about.
the denunciation of Arafat has been much stronger in the last year.
That's right.
At least in terms of the years, my years.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I mean, and that of course occurred because I was profoundly shocked by the dimensions of our capitulation. But I also think it's important to try as much as possible to raise consciousness. You know, I mean, I'm not. A lot of what I write is not only written for Americans, but for my own people.
You write in Arabic.
I write in Arabic as well, and so it's important to try as much as possible to tell the truth. And I think there I've largely succeeded. I mean, because it's interesting that they haven't responded to me.
Well, but almost Arafat gave you the back of his hand in a sense by saying, "Well, I've heard this because this doesn't matter."
No, he didn't actually say that. He just said that he said that you know Edward Said is far away.
Yeah,
but he was in Tunis at the time.
Yeah, I know, but it was a real thing. I mean, he's over in the United States where he sits in a comfortable university position, and I'm over here part of the struggle, trying to move from house to house every night to stay alive.
Yes, right. Well, I mean, that's not a response, is it? I mean, I'm simply putting forward as much as I can facts, reality, truth.
Let me just,
and they need to be responded
to. Okay, here is I'm almost out of time. Do you think that your voice and others will precipitate some kind of debate?
It has. It has already.
That's going on right now within the Palestinian community over what truths are we face and what reality.
Every day brings me more news and more people asking to have more public meetings. We have to air this, and you know, people in the internet. I'm not saying it's because of me. But I think the kind of criticism, the kind of intellectual position that I've taken has emboldened other people. And now asking a question, you know, our leaders have to be accountable to us.
I leave with this. What do you hope to accomplish by being as candid and outspoken as you are? As you know, as I mentioned, you look and say, I may only have a few number of years, however it might be, to get my thing done, to have an impact beyond what I already have.
Yes.
What is it you want to do?
I think the main thing is to get more people to participate, you know, in our community. I mean, there are 6 million Palestinians. More people have to come forward and say, this is what we feel, because we're all involved. It's our future as a people. Let's not leave it just to them, number one. And number two, to make as much as possible the leadership of our people accountable to the people. The idea is we have to speak a language in which people have to respond to us. When we say, well, what have you done? This is happening now. This is happening now. He has to face it. And I think it's part of a general Arab trend. It's not just Palestinians, because my stuff is circulated throughout the Arab world.
There have been too many demagogues.
Exactly,
Too many
exactly. And I think that's the important thing. It's the opening of a debate on democracy and responsibility and participation.
And hopefully in that process we can also eliminate stereotypes.
Absolutely. The main thing are the cliches. It's just say, oh, it's a wonderful thing, and all that.
Great to have you here.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. We'll talk about memory and how dreams affects memory and process.